One of the many signs of the worrying level of shrinking of the Dead Sea is the popping up of thousands of sinkholes all around its shores.
The Dead Sea, a historic body of water that has existed since biblical times, is facing an unprecedented crisis. It was once a massive water body, but it is now shrinking fast, and it's difficult to ignore the consequences. Sinkholes are now forming around the sea as the surrounding land is collapsing, and explorers have uncovered a chilling cave that offers a hint into the secrets of the region. What's causing this dramatic transformation, and what does it mean for the future of the Dead Sea? Sinkholes are forming in the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is transforming into something striking and troubling, and experts are racing to find out how they can solve the problem. As the water level plunges, the ground around it is collapsing into deep, unexpected holes. With over 3,000 sinkholes around the sea, compared to just a few dozen in the 1990s, the landscape is literally cracking under pressure. The water in the Dead Sea has been dropping at the rate of about 3 feet per year because all the rivers and streams that used to feed it are being diverted for farming and drinking. Also, hotter air means more evaporation. As the water recedes, it exposes a wide shoreline that was once submerged, and beneath this lies a hidden danger. Interestingly, under the surface lies a thick layer of salt that has been built up over thousands of years when the lake was full. Now, fresh water from mountain runoff or seasonal floods is seeping into the ground, where the salty lake held everything in place. That fresh water dissolves the salt layer, carving subterranean cavities underneath the ground. When the roof of those cavities gives way, the surface collapses suddenly, and that's how a sinkhole is born. What makes this even more frightening is the unpredictability. These sinkholes appear without warning, sometimes right under places people use like the roads, homes, agricultural fields, and tourist resorts. Some of these holes are over 10 meters deep and tens of meters across, and even look like a meteor literally crashed in. The impact is real and immediate. Infrastructure is failing, highways have buckled and been closed, and even former tourist destinations by the Dead Sea are half abandoned as the ground becomes unsafe. Also, many farms have lost land, and anyone who goes close to the sea should be worried about what might just happen. What makes this crisis especially urgent is that even if you stop the water loss today, the damage is already built in. The sinkholes are always there, and the next collapse could happen anywhere these conditions exist. Experts are racing to find out where the new holes might open up, but it's as difficult as it is unpredictable. But everyone is now asking, what's the worst that could happen? Well, the Dead Sea won't collapse into itself like a drained bathtub, but it will still have far-reaching impacts for those that live in this region. Entire stretches of land along the shoreline might suddenly collapse into massive holes, and this can affect homes, farms, resorts, roads, and infrastructure. Even the tourism industry that depends on the Dead Sea's shore and resorts could eventually crash because of this. Agricultural land could also drop out from under farmers very suddenly, and there have already been fatalities. The sinkholes that are now created in the Dead Sea could trigger some chain reactions. Since the ground is unstable, a collapse in one place could trigger collapses in other places, especially where the cavities connect. Scientists have already found out that the sinkholes can cluster, and the only question now is, how far could these sinkholes go? Well, some are saying that the sinkholes in the Dead Sea are more terrifying than even this, which is related to some prophecies from centuries ago. Prophecy and predictions. Theologists and experts are connecting the sinkholes around the Dead Sea to a prophetic vision of the book of Zechariah, especially chapters 12 to 14. In these passages, Jerusalem, and by extension Israel, is being called a heavy stone or burdensome stone to all the nations of the earth. For example, verse 12:3 states, "And on that day I will make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all the peoples. All who burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the peoples of the earth are gathered together against it." The image is unmistakable. It symbolizes a weight that no one can shift and a focus on international conflict and spiritual reckoning. Experts say that the heavy stone metaphor implies Jerusalem will come under such pressure and invasion that the mere attempt to move or subdue it becomes disastrous. Proponents of this theory interpret the mounting geological disruptions in the region of the Dead Sea, like the disappearance of shoreline and the growing number of sinkholes, as physical signs of that prophetic day. They say that Israel's increasing global visibility, rising tensions around Jerusalem, and environmental collapse around the Dead Sea are proof of what Zechariah said about nations gathering against Israel and the land becoming unstable. Even more interesting, Zechariah 14 speaks of nations gathered to battle Jerusalem, an earthquake splitting the Mount of Olives, and a healing of waters flowing out from the city toward the city. Verse 14:4 says, "His feet shall stand on that day on the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and a valley will form when half the mountain moves toward the north and half toward the south." Experts are also pointing towards the words of Yitzhak Kaduri, an Israeli rabbi who predicted that the Messiah would appear after the passing of Ariel Sharon. Kaduri said that the Messiah's name is Yehoshua and would come after Sharon's death. All these prophecies say that Israel will be under pressure with nature itself shifting and the Messiah arriving. Of course, scientific experts don't believe in these prophecies and state that this might just be a natural process instead. But as scientists were looking into the sea and the area around it, they found a creepy cave that held scary historical items, one of which was a Dead Sea Scroll. AI translates Dead Sea Scroll fragments. As some experts look into the sinkholes in the Dead Sea, archaeologists with the Israel Antiquities Authority have announced that more than 80 tiny parchment fragments had been found in Cave 8 of the Judean Desert Canyon, and it's now called the Cave of Horror. It held the skeletons of about 40 men, women, and children who had sought refuge there during the Bar Kokhba revolt. The Dead Sea Scroll fragments are part of a Greek translation of what we call the Scroll of the 12. They also found some similar objects in the 1950s and 60s. What do these fragments say? Shockingly, and this might send a chill down your spine, they were verses from books on Zechariah and Nahum. The verse says, "Speak the truth to one another. Render in your gates judgments that are true and make for peace." Interestingly, in the Greek text, the engine differs slightly. Instead of saying, "in your gates," the writing says, "in your streets." The fragments discovered also preserve the divine name in ancient Hebrew characters, even if the rest of the text is Greek. This is a feature that the Jewish used to use, mixing up their languages to keep information safe. When looking into the language and script style, scientists discovered that these fragments were written in the 1st century BCE or early CE. These scrolls might have been hidden in the cave during or after the Bar Kokhba revolt. This was a way to keep sacred texts safe in a dangerous time. Experts also looked into the language and style of the script and found out that these fragments were probably written in the 1st century BCE or early CE and might have been hidden in the cave during or after the Bar Kokhba revolt as a way to protect the sacred texts from being destroyed. Schools are very excited because the Greek version is not exactly the name of the standard Septuagint version of the Minor Prophets. Instead, there are some textual variances, wording changes, and scribal differences. This allows us to understand further about how Jewish communities used, copied, and transmitted Scripture in Greek form. The fragments of the Dead Sea Scroll come from different hands, and experts have discovered that at least 2 scribes wrote on that scroll. Also, the parchment texture and ink match other regions, suggesting that these strange texts were produced by more than one community, not just the famous Qumran group. That means that multiple Jewish couples were engaged in preserving Scripture in the Greek language, adapting it for their time and storing it away when the world grew unsafe. But it wasn't only the Dead Sea Scroll fragments that were discovered by scientists looking into the Cave of Horror. They found even more strange and eerie items. Cave of Horror reveals remains and fragments. Inside the Cave of Horror, they found one of the most haunting and extraordinary archaeological assemblages in Israel. The cave has a chilling name for a good reason. In the 1950s and 60s, explorers found the skeletal remains of Jewish men, women, and children who had sought refuge there during the Bar Kokhba revolt and perished trapped by Roman forces. In March 2021, during excavations, they couldn't believe what they saw. Aside from the scrolls, there was a remarkably preserved child's body, a vast woven basket dating to pre-pottery times, and ancient coins from the Bar Kokhba era. The child was aged between roughly 6 and 12 years, was wrapped in clothes, and then laid in a pit beneath stones. The desiccated cave climate had pretty much mummified the remains. Her burial dates to about 6,000 years ago and gives the site a span of human occupation from Neolithic times to Roman-era revolt. Even more astounding, they found a large intact woven basket, estimated to be over 10,000 years old. It's likely one of the oldest complete baskets ever found. This basket was made from plant fiber, and it suggests that long ago, long before ceramics, people at this location were weaving, storing, and transporting goods in sophisticated ways. Alongside these prehistoric finds, archaeologists uncovered coins minted during the revolt against Rome, along with arrowheads and other weapons-era artifacts, linking part of the cave's story to the desperate final stand of Jewish rebels. Further still, the team also found 80 fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls hidden in the cave during the turmoil of revolt. What emerges from the Cave of Horror is a layered story of an ancient storage and burial site used across millennia, a refuge during a bloody uprising, and finally, a hidden library of sacred texts. With all these findings, experts are realizing that Israel is facing a worse problem with the Dead Sea. It's quickly drying up, and this isn't only because of the sinkholes. Other reasons why the Dead Sea is drying up. The drying of the Dead Sea is not simply a matter of shrinking water or dramatic sinkholes, but it's because of human choices, industrial activity, and climate pressures. One major factor is the dramatic reduction of freshwater flowing into the lake. The Jordan River once supplied substantial volumes of water every year, but over past decades, most of the water has been diverted for agriculture, domestic supply, and regional development. The inflows have reduced to a fraction of their historical levels, and the balance that used to maintain the Dead Sea has been upset. At the same time, the region's natural evaporation rates have done the rest. The lake has no outlet, and water flows in but must leave by evaporation. Because the climate is extremely arid, hot, and sun-intense, evaporation has always been high. Now, evaporation is increasing. Studies show that rising temperatures, changing wind patterns, and reduced humidity around the lake are boosting evaporation further. Industrial extraction also plays a large role. Along the shores of the Dead Sea, operations funnel lake water into evaporation ponds for the removal of minerals like potash, bromine, and magnesium. These ponds expose large surfaces to the air and accelerate water loss, essentially harvesting water from the lake. Meanwhile, climate change and decreasing rainfall are tightening the squeeze even further. The streams and seasonal channels that feed the Dead Sea through the mountain runoff depend on the rainy seasons. When rainfall drops, there is less fresh surface water, less groundwater recharge, and less contribution to the lake's volume. Another subtle but important mechanism is groundwater and aquifer shifts. As the lake shrinks, water tables around the basin fall. Wetlands dry up, and groundwater that once buffered or fed into the lake is altered. This change in subterranean water flows reduces the natural replenishment from beneath, in addition to the visible surface decline. So, the Dead Sea's decline is a buildup of problems, and it causes many to question what the future of this region might be. Implications of the Dead Sea drying up. As the Dead Sea is drying up, it's reshaping the ecology, economy, and culture in the entire region. Water is receding, and so the habitats that used to depend on stable water levels are now faltering. Springs and aquifers near the shore are drying or receding, reducing freshwater support to places like the Ein Gedi Nature Reserve and other ecosystems that rely on spring or groundwater flows for survival. As the sea is retreating, the landscape itself is changing. The former seabed has become dry land, revealing salt crusts and loose sediment. The newly exposed terrain is vulnerable to erosion, sometimes caused by occasional rain or seasonal streams, which carve steep gullies or gorges into the ground. Eventually, it undermines roads, agriculture land, and infrastructure. The waters themselves are becoming harsher. As the lake shrinks, the concentration of dissolved salts rises, altering the chemical environment dramatically. The hypersalinity stresses or eliminates even the salt-tolerant microorganisms that live in this sea, and it's shaking up the entire ecosystem. But that's not all, as the ecological changes ripple into the economic realm. Tourism around the Dead Sea once thrived on its unique floating experience, mineral-rich mud, and lakeside resorts. But as the shoreline retreats and ground stability becomes unpredictable due to sinkholes and land collapse, tourism infrastructure is under threat, and visitor numbers might decline. Even agriculture is suffering in the areas around the Dead Sea. Farmers near the lakeshore face disappearing fields, shifting groundwater levels, more saline intrusion, and higher costs of irrigation or land remediation. Culturally and socially, this transformation is also affecting the communities that have been relying on the Dead Sea for livelihood, recreation, or tradition. The landscape that held both historical and spiritual significance, like ancient trade routes, healing mud baths, and historic settlements, is now being damaged as the Dead Sea collapses with sinkholes. With parts of the coastline lost or deemed unsafe and infrastructure compromised, the connection many people have with the lake is changing. What's more, exposed seabeds can become sources of mineral dust or airborne salt particles, affecting air quality and health for those in that region. Now that the Dead Sea is literally collapsing with sinkholes all around it, the government has revealed its plans to protect this region and prevent the sea from drying up too quickly. Government plans to protect the Dead Sea. Governments and regional authorities have in recent years proposed and taken several serious steps to try to protect the Dead Sea, or at least slow down its dramatic decline, but it has had mixed success so far. One major initiative is a revived plan to build a water conveyance from the Red Sea to the Dead Sea, designed to funnel seawater into the shrinking lake to help raise its water level. The Red Dead Canal, or what some call the Two Seas Canal, was revived in the early 2010s, with an agreement between Jordan and Israel providing the political framework. As part of the plan, seawater from the Red Sea would be pumped to a desalination plant near the Red Sea port, producing fresh water for human use, while the leftover salty brine would be routed north and discharged into the Dead Sea. The idea is that the infusion of brine would help counter the long-term drop in water level, slowing down the retreat of the shoreline and preventing further shrinkage. Beyond purely engineering fixes, there have also been steps toward granting mineral extraction companies stronger environmental obligations. In 2023, the relevant Israeli ministry outlined a plan that ties the renewal of mining and mineral extraction licenses to environmental safeguards. At the same time, there are many environmental groups and water management activities calling for restoration of natural inflows to the Dead Sea, especially from the Jordan River, which is its main tributary. There is growing support for rehabilitating the Jordan River watershed, rethinking water use upstream, and reducing diversions so more fresh water can flow into the Dead Sea region. Of course, we can't neglect regional cooperation in the protection of the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea borders more than one country, and success depends on agreements and coordination between those nations. Past efforts have seen collaboration between Israel, Jordan, and other places. But unfortunately, political, technical, environmental, and financial challenges are affecting progress. The Dead Sea is now drying up, and experts have discovered caves around the area that hold items from centuries ago. With sinkholes appearing around the sea, many are questioning whether this could cause the sea to eventually collapse or completely shift its geography. What do you think, and does this have a connection to prophecies? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. So, thanks for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one.